The mugged. Probably the time I got mugged. So I used to go to dance classes when I was around 17. It was easy for me to do because the classes were in the apartment right next to my school, and my mother would drive by that road when she was going home from work. So after school, I'd go to the apartment, and I only had to wait about 45 minutes before my mother would drive by and she'd take me home. That is, of course, unless she didn't drive by, which happened only one time. I sat outside the school in my dance clothes for like an hour or two, and the sun had started to set. Immediately, I started panicking. People walked by, glancing at this skinny girl trying to blend into the pavement, until the trickle of people had fallen to a drizzle. Then, there was no one but me and the dark sky. I had to go home by myself. I walked home, trying to walk confidently, but there was definitely no confidence in my jittery steps. I kept under the pole-lit places and avoided those that weren't lit. I started thinking I had it all under control, till the alleyway. So there was an alleyway a few meters in front of me, which I didn't think much about in my relaxed state. But when I walked past, there was standing a group of boys lit by the butts of their cigarettes. Could have been 7 or 13, I don't know. I didn't look longer than a split second. The sight of them shocked me enough that I stumbled a bit as I walked on. I heard a snicker, but concentrated on walking on. After I was about a couple of blocks down, I heard footsteps walking behind me. Many footsteps, but oddly enough, no one was speaking. And that's really what creeped the hell out of me. I wondered if looking back would make them realize I was scared or not. I wondered if taking out my earphones and putting them on would make me look relaxed, but then I wondered if that would just give them an idea of what to take from me, if they wanted to take anything from me. I didn't even know if they wanted to take something from me. But I walked like that for a while, trying to keep a steady pace, and as my mind stopped racing for a moment, I realized something. Their footsteps were drawing closer and closer to me, and just then, the windows of my home were visible, light pouring out. She left me, that woman. But now I was just rushing under the train rails, where things got exponentially darker, and subconsciously, I pulled out my earphones. I realized what I'd done and stuffed them back in my pocket when one of the boys' faces appeared next to me. I screamed. He looked surprised for a moment and close to running, but then he reached out and grabbed my wrist. A few other hands grabbed at my coat, and I punched everywhere I could, while kicking with both feet, since some had wrapped their arms around my waist and hoisted me into the air. But just as it started, it ended quickly. I fell on the floor and covered my head. When I looked up, gasping and snorting like a pig, they were all gone. They took my phone, my bag, and my jacket. Ironically, my headphones were still with me. When Dad heard what happened, he was very furious with my mother and yelled for most of the night. Suffice to say, I haven't been to any dance classes ever since. The Jagger. I think a ghost stole my ice cream, though I guess technically I gave it to him. The story isn't as clear-cut as it should be. Nothing about the story is clean. So it was a hot Saturday night, and I was on my way home. I'd just come from the market from buying ice cream and a few other cooling materials, but I was in no hurry to use them. Even though it was dark, the heat felt like it would strangle me if I tried to run, so I took my time walking home. I was so relaxed that I decided to walk home through the train rails, which suddenly popped up in my head. When I got to the rails, the place was very disturbing. The tracks I walked on weren't brown in the dark anymore. They were orange with red smudges. Kinda looked like dried blood. I decided to suppress that thought, but it became clear to me that since there was no moon, the place looked like a dark tunnel. The tracks traveled into the distance and disappeared into the darkness, and an entourage of trees engulfed it and me, causing a memory to surge through me. When I was a kid, they used to be green and big. I remember when I was young, we used to be woken up by the sound of the train passing by. My friends and I stole these plastic colorful ropes and tied them to the tree next to the train. We would then make a makeshift swing, and it was so pure. Now the trees were black and filled with holes, crawling up some things. And that tree that had our ropes, it was skinny and turned at angles now, looking like an old man tree. Other than the sound of my feet tapping on the metal, I could hear the sound of animals in the forest. But then suddenly, when I passed the old man tree, they all got quiet. Not a cricket made a sound. This was beyond strange, so I stopped and tried to look into the forest, trying to see what was in there. But there was nothing in the forest around me, nothing out of the ordinary. Now, only the sound of tapping remained. But I wasn't walking. How was the rail still tapping if I wasn't walking? That's when I looked to the darkness the rail descended to. A mist appeared, wrapping around my shaking legs and into the distance. It allowed me to see that there was not just darkness there. There was a new body appearing, the mist splitting around his dark silhouette, and he was walking on the tracks like me. I didn't want him to see I was creeped out, so I greeted. I told him I didn't realize that people still walked around here. He didn't say anything. He just kept walking to me. I started taking steps back, not understanding why the guy wasn't speaking. It was when I saw the old man tree next to me that I remembered the reason why we stopped coming here. My mother forbade us from coming here. Why? Well, that tree? That was the tree where a boy hung himself. The man dashed towards me, and I caught him. I screamed at him to stop and chucked the plastic at him. I turned and ran away, looking back to see the man was dressed in a massive coat. I turned to the forest and ran through the shortcuts we used to use. I managed to reach the road, huffing hard and sweating, and I ran back home as fast as I could. And when I got home, my parents asked if there was anything wrong, and I quickly said no. But later, as I was in the bathroom, I looked out the window, and there I saw him. The guy in the coat was walking through the streets. He stopped, and slowly he turned his head, and he looked at me. I called my parents and told them what happened. My dad told me I should go to sleep, but I think my mom believed me. The washer. This is a story I heard back at school from a friend. Now behold, my superior penmanship. In brackets, FYI, I'm just joking. I told her to send me the story and she sent it via WhatsApp. Close brackets. Enjoy, if you can. The train chewed. At a day where the sun had reddened the sky, a mother by the name of Linda was washing her laundry in the river. On the grassy hill behind her, which had train rails passing through the summit, her 3 sons were playing. One boy pushed the youngest, and he tripped over a brick and fell to the floor. He let out a loud wail. The eldest, Luke, turned to the mother and yelled, "Mom, Mark made Ted cry again." "Don't fight, boys," Linda said unattentively. "Ah, Luke is such a crybaby," Mark said. "Why don't you ever fight for yourself?" Luke ignored his younger brother and turned to his youngest. "Ted, get up, it's your turn to run." While Ted hurried with his short legs and wobbled away with the joy only a child could reach, Mark cried, "Fine, then who's catching?" "Choo-choo," The train chewed, pumping steam into the air. "You," Luke said, pushing his younger brother before running away. The train chewed, steam puffing and the rails squealing. Linda dipped Mark's pants into the water and tried to scrub them. She whistled away, not because she had a tune. She didn't have one. She didn't know what the boys were going to eat this Thursday and Friday. If they had lunch at school, it would all end before Tuesday. She didn't know when their father was coming back. Ted is 4 now and still hasn't met his father yet. She scrubbed at the collar of Mark's shirt, whistling away. She didn't have a tune. She couldn't think of one. She could only wonder of how she was going to tell the boys they probably wouldn't be able to go to school anymore. Should she start with the negatives? That she didn't think they'd finish school at all? They'd be just like her and their father? Or the positives? That, well, there must be one thing out there. Something good in the boy's life. Something if they were to lose, they wouldn't be anywhere. They had something like that. Right? The train chewed, screeching as Mark ran through the grass and shoved Ted on his back before running back and laughing. Before Ted could cry again, Luke ran over. "Here, tag me." Ted laughed and chased, tagging his eldest brother. Then Luke turned to Mark with eyes of the devil. Mark tried to run as fast as he could, but he knew it wouldn't last long. He'd made it almost as far as the river, but a stone got into the holes in his shoe, and he slowed. Luke didn't care of the reason. He just tagged him and ran off. And now Mark was really mad. Mark rushed up the hill to Ted, who squealed the little and ran up the hill. Luke told him to run, knowing that Mark would get him eventually, but no worries. He would just let Ted tag him again, and he'd tag Mark again. Ted laughed and got to the rails, but by then Mark was on him. Mark tagged him with both hands, and the boy flew and fell on the rails, bursting out in tears. "Mark, you didn't have to tag him so hard," Luke yelled angrily, but Mark just laughed and started running down the hill. Then there was a loud shrill. The train chewed. It appeared around the corner. "Ted, get out of there!" Luke yelled. The tone of his voice made Linda stop and turn around. Then her face became ashen. "Ted! Ted, move!" Linda yelled, her voice straining. The boy got up and tried to move, but stopped to grab his leg. He then let out a cry, filled with pure fear and panic. "Ted!" Linda dashed out of the river and onto the mountain, but she was too far, and the train chewed. Mark ran up the hill and reached Ted, who immediately tried to hug him. "No, you idiot! Stop being such a crybaby," Mark said, trying to stop his own shaking chin and hands. He grabbed and yanked at the youngest boy, but the boy was held down by something. "Mark, get out of there! Get him out of there!" Luke cried, and the train chewed. "I'm trying," Mark said, and tried to look. But the boy's leg was stuck in the planks, and everything got blurry. "I'm trying! Fuck!" But then a hand clasped his shoulder, and he was pushed back. It was a blurry blonde that he saw when he looked. His mother. She'd made it. He stepped up to help her, but she pushed his chest. "Don't! You've done enough!" She couldn't afford to have all 3 boys up there. The train chewed, and Ted let out a shriek, but there was no reason to fear, because Linda miraculously made it. "Come on!" She grabbed and tugged, but he let out a shriek, and his body wouldn't move. His leg was stuck in the planks. Linda pulled him with all her strength, and as the train neared, and Luke, her brave and courageous firstborn, screamed, "Mama!" The train chewed, and the wind of it blew the rag she called a skirt into the air, rattling the rails under their feet. But finally, there was a creak, and the boy's body came loose, and it jammed. The boy let out a scream, and she looked to see the cause. His boots, the ones she'd bought for Luke, then passed down to Mark, and now Ted, were caught on the tracks. The train chewed, vibrating her arms and legs. Mark, her bold, stubborn, and arrogant son, screamed "Mama!" with her throat choked. Linda grabbed a bottle piece. The train 15 seconds away. She stabbed at the shoe and foot. Red liquid squirted out into her hands. And Ted screamed. The train chewed. 10 seconds away. Ted screamed and hugged her, his face riddled with fear and panic. Her young, sweetest child screamed "Mama!" The train chewed. Linda turned to look at the train one more time. And she turned to then look at her boys. Luke, Mark, 5 seconds away. The mother hugged her son.